When I was 20 years old, I worked the night shift at Walmart when it was still open 24 hours. The majority of it was stocking shelves rather than dealing with customers. Not many other employees were needed to work nights either. Of course, the occasions when I did have to deal with people were some of the weirdest encounters of my life. One night, I was putting toys up on the shelves in the boys section when a man appeared at the end of the aisle. I looked over and saw he was smiling. He was a larger man, over 6 feet tall and muscular. He was also rough-looking and had a lot of tattoos, making it seem obvious he had spent a long time doing hard manual labor or hard time in prison, or more likely both. Either way, with me being on the shorter side and not being athletic, this guy dwarfed me. After we made eye contact, he commented on the toy box I was holding in my hand that I had meant to put on the shelf. It was a G.I. Joe action figure. The man said I would look cute playing with that doll. Taken aback, I asked him to repeat himself. The man laughed it off and moved on, but what he said next wasn't any better. He asked me where the lube was. I sighed and told him it was all the way on the other side of the store, near the pharmacy, by the condoms, which were next to the medicines. Unfortunately, I also had to tell him that the shelf with all the family planning type things was locked up, so I had to go with him and unlock it. Not only did I have to stop what I was doing for this guy, I also had to walk with him for several hundred feet. He, on the other hand, was pleased. I tried to walk as quickly as possible, but he intentionally lagged behind so he could get more time to talk to me. It was normal small talk at first, but then he started asking increasingly personal questions about me. It started out with asking where I went to school, how long I'd been working at Walmart, and by the time we finally got to the aisle and I opened up the shelf for him, he was asking if I ever had a girlfriend. When I said no, he asked me if that was because it wasn't girls that I was into. I was speechless. The man reached into the shelf and took out the bottle of lube, then grabbed my wrist and pulled my arm up, placing the lube in my hand. Then, he told me that this kind of lube was the best for beginners because it had a numbing agent. I recoiled in shock, shoving the bottle at him and slamming the shelf closed. I told him off for being a creep and threatened to have him kicked out of the store. Then I stormed back to the toy aisle so I could get back to work. He didn't follow me, but I made quick work of clearing the cart so I could go into the back of the store. I hid there for as long as I could get away with. Then I went back out and unloaded another cart. I didn't see anyone out there the whole time. I figured the creep had left. I entered the second stall, closed the door, and sat down on the toilet. Immediately, I realized I'd made a horrible mistake, as I saw a pair of feet lowering to the floor of the stall next to me. They clearly belonged to the man from before. It was as if he had been hiding and waiting for me. In a panic, I rushed to stand up and put on my pants, but before I knew it, the man had come out of the stall and walked around to block my escape. I could see his feet just below the door and just barely the top of his head above it. He told me from the other side to hold out my hands because this was my last chance to apply the lube, as he wasn't going to bother with it. Then, his hand emerged at the top of the door and held the bottle of lube over it. The bottle was open. He squeezed it, sending a long, slimy strand of fluid spilling to the floor. He made a wet, slapping sound on the tile as it formed a puddle. He said he was giving me a moment to rub it all the way in. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I was trapped. Suddenly, the door swung open with a bang. The lock didn't stand a chance of stopping him. He stood in the doorway, grinning. He saw that I had my pants on and told me I made the wrong choice. Then he lunged forward at me. He pinned me against the wall, then grabbed me by my throat and started to squeeze, strangling me. The blood flow to my brain was cut off. Despite my attempts to hit his face and groin and try to break free, everything started to go black. I couldn't even scream. I was on the verge of passing out. A moment before it was over, I felt my neck get released and my body fell to the floor. I don't know how long it took for me to fully wake back up, but when I did, I saw the man fighting with one of my coworkers. They had their belt wrapped around his neck, and they were strangling him from behind. But they were being slammed against the wall, so I ran up, jammed my thumbs into his eyes, and kicked him in the groin. He shouted in pain, but then he kicked me back to the floor and threw my coworker over his shoulder. They landed on me as the man ran off. We were too hurt to follow. We weren't seriously injured, but the man got away. And police never caught up to him. I owe my old coworker everything for saving me from what was about to happen. If he had held off for 20 more minutes, he would have walked into a much more gruesome scene.